So why does gold cost more than steel? So you've probably seen gold before, it's a shiny metal, and you've probably seen steel before, it's another shiny metal. And in fact, these two metals are qualitatively very similar. They feel similar, they both have sort of a metallic shine, they're both really good conductors of heat and electricity. And yet, according to Bloomberg, the current price of gold is well over $1,500 a pound. And meanwhile, you can go over to Home Depot, or Metal Depot rather, and get a 22-pound beam for $65. So this is interesting, and as engineers, this is a question we wanted to tackle because these are the materials we use for building things. Whether it's electronics, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, parts, we use these materials, and it's very interesting to see why is there such a disparity in price. So one of the factors that plays into this is this principle of scarcity. Uh, the idea is that as consumers, we have a virtually unlimited desire for goods and services, but that's limited by what suppliers can actually provide. And the suppliers are limited by what's known as the factors of production, which include five things. It includes labor, human capital, entrepreneurship, natural resources and land, and capital. Now, when we're looking at the production of steel versus the production of gold, the most obvious factors of production that have discrepancies are land and labor. So we're going to talk about those. So if you look at this pie chart right here, you'll notice that iron makes up 5% of the Earth's crust. That's what this pie chart is the makeup of the Earth's crust. And that's interesting because that's the major metal element in steel is iron. And you can contrast that with gold, and you'll notice gold isn't even on here. It would be part of the other 0.8%. And in fact, gold makes up 0.0000031% of Earth's crust. So a much smaller percent. Now, what does that mean? That means that to produce the same volume of gold, you need significantly more land and you need significantly more labor. And if you were to graph this on a supply chart, you'll see that for the same price of gold, you can produce significantly more steel than gold. So the supply curves are different, and the supply curves are different because there's different limiting factors of production. One last point I want to make before we move on is you'll notice aluminum makes up 8.1% of the Earth's crust. That's going to be important when we talk about substitutes and consumer choice.
The next section that we want to discuss in order to answer the central question is consumer choices. Consumers of gold and consumers of steel make different decisions and have different opportunity costs for their respective good. 78% of the gold market is in the consumption of jewelry, which often gains its values not from its utility but by the fact that it's made of gold itself. Gold jewelry is a vital part to many religious ceremonies, especially in Indian culture. The value derived from gold is from consumer taste rather than its ability to do work. In contrast, steel is valued for its utility, meaning that if a substitute is available that can perform nearly as well but at a lower cost, the consumer will choose the alternative. According to the Organization for Economic Development, the main substitute for steel is aluminum. Looking at the graph, we can see a scenario where aluminum experiences a shift in supply from S1 to S2 that results in an increase in quantity demanded and a lower price from P1 to P2. At this point, people deciding between aluminum and steel may be incentivized to choose aluminum because of the lower price, and the demand will shift to the left for steel from D2 to D1. This is another reason why steel may be lower priced than gold is because of the availability of substitutes to the consumers.
Supply and demand is one of the most simple microeconomic tools that can be used to explain the difference in price between gold and steel. The supply curve helps us understand the behavior of the producers of each metal, while the demand curve describes the behavior of those consuming the gold and steel at a given price. As shown in these supply curves, the gold supply is steeper than that of steel, making it more inelastic. Compared with steel, gold producers' change in price is more drastic, than a given change quantity. Steel, on the other hand, is more elastic. The quantity changes more drastically with a given change of price. Looking at demand, the consumers of gold seem to pay a higher price for increased quantity, while usually consumers would rather pay a lower price for more of a product. On a regular basis, consumers' willingness to pay diminishes over a change of quantity. This positive slope of gold demand explains for a higher price. Looking more in depth at a gold demand curve, we must interpret the factors. Gold has multiple attractive features persuading consumer tastes and many related goods, including jewelry and technology. One of the reasons the price for gold is so high compared to steel is that those who consume gold have a much higher income than those who consume steel. Those who purchase gold at a larger amount only solidify its high price. This metal has always been a symbol of wealth, therefore, the expectation for the future does not stray from the past. Assuming an ounce of gold costs $1,700, the gold consumers in the United States spend about $10 billion a year. The number of buyers in the gold market with the scarcity of production clearly set a higher price than steel.
Based on the supply and demand curves, the principle of scarcity, and the concept of consumer tastes, it can be assessed that gold is a more expensive good than steel. The combination of a historic association with wealth, attractive physical properties, and a high production cost contribute to the expensive price which people are willing to pay for gold. In contrast, steel, which sees more widespread use throughout modern civilization, has a lower price due to its less complicated production cycle and the physical properties which cater more towards practical uses rather than use as a luxury item. This comparison is just one example which exhibits how the influence of microeconomics is not as simple as determining the utility of a product. These are the citations for our images.